Secrets of the Whales from National Geographic is an awe-inspiring, epic, and emotional series illuminating the whale way of life, how they love, how they feel, and how they think. It was my honor to narrate this four-part series for Disney+. As I watched each episode, I was truly astonished at what I was witnessing. Each time I saw new footage of Brian Scarry's epic journey from around the world, filmed using the latest cutting-edge technology, I was just completely blown away. I've never seen anything like this before. I hope you enjoy the series as much as we enjoyed making it.
Hi, my name is Janelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and welcome to this Q&A with Nat Geo series, Secret of the Whales, airing on Disney+. At this time, please join me in welcoming the artists who brought this amazing docuseries to life. We have photographer, producer Brian Scarry. We have composer Raphael Thibault, executive producer, writer-director Brian Armstrong, and executive producer Shannon Malone de Benedictis. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, congratulations on a truly breathtaking and emotional experience. I'd love to start at the beginning with Brian Scarry, because you've been telling stories about our oceans for 3 decades, I believe. What was the initial jumping off point for Secrets of the Whales, and what interested you in getting up close with these magnificent animals?
Well, thanks, Janelle. Yeah, you know, I have spent a lifetime in the ocean trying to tell stories about various marine wildlife and conservation issues and so forth. But the sort of genesis for this project was the last big story that I did for National Geographic, which was published in 2008, about right whales, the most endangered whale in the world. And since that time, I wanted to do a multi-species story of whales. The trick was really looking at what the narrative would be. In 2015, I did a cover story about dolphin intelligence. Dolphins, of course, are just smaller whales. And I didn't know it then, but I learned later that what I was really focusing on by looking at dolphin cognition was indeed their cultures, the fact that whales and dolphins within a genetically identical species are doing things differently. They have preferences for international cuisine. They have parenting techniques. They isolate based on dialect. They have singing competitions, for lack of a better analogy. And that, like humans, you know, depending where in the world they are, they have their unique cultures. So it was a few years of research to sort of drill down and find a layered approach with multiple species. And then that was how we sort of launched into Secrets of the Whales, being a little less clinical in terms of wildlife coverage and really looking at these animals through the lens of culture.
And I'm curious for the rest of you, how did you sort of become aware of the project, and what did you know about whales and their ecosystems going in? And let's start with Brian Armstrong.
Well, quite a bit about where I've been making films for a long time for National Geographic and with Red Rock Films for the last 10 years. And a lot of work with whales. I've been diving since I was 18, nowhere near the knowledge that Brian Scarry has. But what I didn't understand and didn't know was this thing about culture. And that's a weird thing to explain when you first read it. Like, what does that actually mean? And the analogy we often use is that, you know, we all use utensils when we're eating, that's behavior, but some people use chopsticks and some people use knives and forks, and that's culture. So how are we going to apply that to whales? And what interests us as filmmakers was to try and find the emotional core of any story, of course. We all like to do that. And introducing this concept of culture and looking at these animals as beings that have emotion, that love, that mourn, that play. Suddenly we had this really rich kind of tapestry we could weave and work with Brian to kind of create the series that we created. So the first we heard about it was through Geographic approaching us. What do you think about this? And it grew from there in many, many different ways. And initially I think it was going to be a little more about Brian, but Brian and Scary and I spoke, and it's like, this is really about the whales. It's not about a photographer. So we see this through Brian's lens and his view through at different segments throughout the course of the series. But it really is about understanding these sentient beings that are so close and so like us in so many ways.
Shannon, what about for you? What appealed to you about this project?
Well, I've been working in wildlife filmmaking for 20 years and 10 of them with Red Rock. And so any story about wildlife, I'm always invested. I'm also a crier. I fully admit that I cry and I find those emotional connections. So I remember talking to Brian Scary and we were talking about culture and talking about these different elements and orcas and sperm whales and humpbacks and belugas. And I was getting very, very excited because I was seeing things that just really connected to me emotionally, that I saw things behaviors that they were doing that were so similar that I saw in my own family or in other cultures. So for me, it was a very emotional journey. And when I started to get more and more and learning about this, it really helped us develop the story that it was in a way that could really convey to everybody about this just amazing discovery and these amazing creatures.
And Raphael, for you, did you know anything about whales going in? What interested you in wanting to compose to this?
I mean, I think I knew a little about whales in the sense that I think we're all kind of fascinated by these animals, right? And especially as a musician, the singing part of, the whales, it's pretty stunning. So my agent has been approached by Brian Armstrong's team, and little I knew back then that I would be so emotionally immersed and involved with this project. I think I composed throughout 2020 for the show, and every minute that I was, scoring for, I was learning a little bit more about the whales. So I thought it was more about when I was actually composing to the pictures, where I really learned that we are fascinated by these animals, but we know so little about them.
I know a little bit more after watching this 4-part series, but I definitely came in knowing nothing. I guess this is really a question for both the Bryans and Shannon. Where did you even begin? I mean, how did you determine the locations and the stories you wanted to tell? Or was it a matter of the story sort of revealing itself to you as you got this footage?
It's a bit of both. I mean, we started with a giant whiteboard, like how are we going to tell these stories? Where do we go? And we had this great leg up with the work that Brian Scary had been doing already. So we had this inroad of what he was doing, which ended up being about 15% of our actual show is stuff that Brian and his team shot. But then that leaves, he can't be everywhere. So that leaves a whole lot of other stuff that we need to get from around the world and it being 24 different countries. So it was really a puzzle to see how this works. And it's not like a scripted film where you can write a script and have a whale show up and do something at a particular time. So that's when we needed, expertise from our, stable of underwater cameramen and people like Brian who know where to go and what to do to try and capture the images that we captured. But it was definitely a jigsaw puzzle the whole time, bringing back the gold that we brought back.
From my perspective as someone who was back in the office and watching the Bryans go out and they'd be filming and they bring the footage back, is I would sit with our post team and Brian would send clips and photos and things, and I would look and be like, oh, this fits the culture, this fits this is an incredible emotional moment. The visuals, Brian Scary is an internationally renowned photographer, so the visuals he takes are just stunning and incredible, but he also captures the emotion and captures the story behind everything. So I would look at the rushes and I would look at them and say, oh, there's a moment. Here's how we can build the story. Here's how we can tell their tale. So that collaborative process of how to put this together, it's a lot of footage, looking through and saying, okay, this is how we're going to piece this together.
How do you choose, though? There must be so much amazing stuff.
Well, in a lot of ways, the stories wrote themselves, because once we had the sort of magic that we captured, and we weren't doing there's a common approach with wildlife filmmaking, you see often out of England, where they will transition from scene to scene without necessarily connecting the storyline between the scenes. Like, meanwhile, over here, this is happening. Whereas we wanted a very different approach. We wanted to really immerse ourselves and feel like we're there with the whales, at the time. And so, there's one show we start, and I can't believe I got the chance to do this, but we started with a 24-second shot of a bubble, which sounds like, how can you focus on a bubble for 24 seconds? But as that bubble's coming up, we're saying that, this is the breath of a giant. And not just any giant, but a sleeping one. And we tilt down and we see these sperms, this like forest of sperm whales standing upright as still as statues, like a whole bunch of trees. And from there we go down, we follow, Brian's team's down there filming one of the first ever examples of a sperm whale baby suckling from its mother. Previously, scientists largely had no idea how that was even done. They have inverted nipples, and it's a very complicated process that no one could work out. So we have this discovery that we're able to instantly go into their world and hook into a character, a baby sperm whale, and then follow that story all the way through. So that kind of storytelling just became it just came out of the images we captured. It was not a difficult thing, to be honest, to craft the through line. Everything else was difficult, but that part was actually, the whales wrote it for us.
You should give them writing credit. Brian Scary, I'm curious, because you do know this world so well. Were there things you knew you wanted to accomplish going in, and how did that sort of shift, and did the narrative change, as you were making this?
Yeah, great question, Janelle. Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, the process over several years involved a lot of research, a lot of reading scientific papers, understanding this notion of culture, attending conferences, talking to researchers who've dedicated their lives to figuring these things out. So in the 2 years before I presented it to National Geographic and sort of built it up, I had produced the shot list. I had identified, I don't know, maybe 15 or 18 locations in which I wanted to work around the world, and had specific scientists that I had talked to so that we could see a male humpback whale singing, or we could see, the Norwegian Arctic behavior, both the wild behavior of them feeding or the getting takeout food next to a fishing vessel. I wanted to hopefully get these various aspects, as Shannon said, that could be, representative of their culture and their emotion and so forth. So those were the things that I sort of set out to do. I had a shot list. Of course, you never know, as I've written in my book, Secrets of the Whales, if you do a Venn diagram of all the things that have to line up just to get an image of a whale, never mind behavior or something that can be described as culture, you end up with a very, very small little bullseye in the center. But, we were blessed in every location. I often describe it as divine intervention, where ultimately, we got what we needed. I mean, sometimes I was in Dominica in the Eastern Caribbean on my second trip to that location, and the first 3 weeks, we didn't see a whale. So, you just don't know what's going to happen. But one way or another, inevitably, it all came together.
Raphael, I would love to know how you approach this project as a composer, because you're scoring along to the natural music of the ocean and the whales. How did you sort of incorporate that into your process?
As I always say, it's difficult not to think of this soundtrack for this movie, The Big Blue, back in the 80s, this French film. Eric Serra had made this incredible score and reproduced these whale sounds out of synthesizers. There's nothing natural about them. It's really synthetic. And of course I thought about it, but I also knew that we didn't want to overstep, the natural sounds already existing in the show. So I really wanted to create something similar, but by being very careful. So I use the same process, and I create this kind of signature whale singing sound that we hear throughout the show. And I really try to incorporate it, as like another instrument to the score, not as a new character for the show. And I think, that also we tend to always believe that music is 100% man-made. And if there's one thing that this show taught me, is that really music is already there. And it was like scoring to an already existing score, to be honest. And not just the singing of the whales, also the music of the waves, the ocean, the underwaters, and all that. So I think I did nothing on purpose. There was not this creative process where like, oh, okay, so what am I gonna do with the crushing waves of these like slow motion movements? These were all unconscious creative choices that I've made, and I just realized that after the fact. That, for example, for the crashing waves, or the humpbacks, when they jump out of the water, I used a lot of cymbals, a lot of rolls, percussive rolls, and it was not even conscious. I was not aware of what I was doing. And every time there was some like spiritual, suspended moments, I would use ethereal vocals and more electrical elements when we would go underwater, and all these choices have been completely, unconscious. So that was interesting.
Obviously, we have to talk about how you captured this stunning photography. I'm curious, not only what were some of the technologies you used, you probably had to create new technologies, and how did you find a crew that specialized in underwater photography?
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in quickly, but I know Brian and Shannon can certainly speak to this in even greater detail. You're right. I think we're living at a very exciting time in terms of ocean storytelling. Camera technology is getting better. It's getting smaller. We're able to shoot in lower light. Things that we can do today we couldn't do just even a few years ago. A video camera that's got a dynamic range of 60 plus f-stops. So it gives you great creative freedom to be able to see things. Because many of these locations are dark. You're shooting in the Norwegian Arctic days before the polar night, when it's going to be dark 24 hours a day, and you're trying to film orca that are, these black and white whales in a very dark ocean. So being able to use technology that gives you that latitude is tremendous. Obviously, drone technology, getting cinematic quality cameras and lenses that can give this sweeping look to something. Being able to build new cameras, the work that I did with beluga whales in the Canadian Arctic, this is an environment where you can't go in the water. As much as I wanted to, it's a very shallow water estuary where hundreds, if not thousands, of beluga whales come every summer. It's their summer playground, and they have their babies, and they roll around, and they use the gravel as a natural loofah to, exfoliate their skin. But if you put as much as a toe in the water, 1,000 whales would stampede out. So before I went up, we designed and built these remote cameras that I could place in the water before the belugas got there, in hopes that we would get it. But it's a halocline environment. You're getting a mixing of fresh water with salt water from the river to the ocean. So even when we got everything tweaked out, all the algorithms, the cameras were working, we were getting footage, you'd go home at night or back to the tent and look at the images, and it was like looking through Jello. It just, that the water wasn't clear. But through trial and error, we could move them around, find the optimal locations where maybe in a 24-hour period we'd get a little bubble of clear water. And if the sun was shining, and if the whales were there, and if the water was clear, we would capture this footage. And we did. We got baby belugas for the first time. We got gameplay where they're picking up stones and playing with them. We see them rolling around in this social behavior. So technology definitely played a big role, but it's a testament to the amazing team here that Red Rock assembled, with all these camera people who have decades of experience in various parts of the world, and specifically working underwater.
And we did a bunch. We shot 179 terabytes of footage. So one of our APs worked out it would take the Hubble telescope 18 years to send that much data back to us. So that's how much footage we're dealing with because of the quality of the footage and the ultra slow motion of the humpback sort of, going up and breaching through the air. We devised a system where we had a drone drop a camera into the water from a height so that it wasn't disturbing any whales, but we could get really close to them without them sort of fearing a diver. And then at the end of the day, though, it really gets down to the team and people like Brian who know these animals, who know when to back off, who knows when they want to play, who knows, and that's something you develop over years and years and years. We had one scene there where there was whales in Antarctica. I was there, this time last year, and we were filming. Humpbacks are often sleeping at the surface. They're, sleep for 20, 40 minutes and maybe longer. And we wanted to get a shot of a humpback eye opening, just when it wakes up from this slumber. And so Ernie Kovacs, one of our many great underwater cameramen, hopped in the water and just very, very slowly from 200 yards out, got closer and closer to this whale, and then just sat in front of it, just a little bit under, all free diving, holding his breath if he was underwater, and just waited. And the whale's eye opened and it looked at him. And we thought, what's it going to do now? Is it going to freak out? You wake me up, or if I feel woken up and someone's standing there, I'm going to come out fighting. And all it wanted to do was play. And we did this several times. And every time these whales spent 30, 40, 50 minutes just playing with Ernie, swimming around, and just wanted to explore this new bizarre creature that was in the water with it. So the whales, and Brian said this on one of the shoots, what a gift that these whales are giving us, allowing us into their world. And I don't know when I could have said it better. And that's how it felt like every shoot. They were just giving us permission to give these little insights that they were giving us.
Just to pick up on what Brian said, Janelle, I think it's important for context to recognize that in underwater photography, we don't have the luxury that our terrestrial counterparts have. We can't sit in a camouflaged blind in some remote location with a 600 millimeter lens and wait for a month for some elusive animal to wander by. We have to get in the water. We have to get close, because even in the clearest of water, we can't use long lenses. And the animals have to let us close. So as Brian said, these whales were generous. They would, not every time, but many times, they would allow us into their world. Brian described the scene that we filmed of a sperm whale, mom and calf, nursing. First time it's been seen. And, that's a very tolerant mom. That's a very relaxed mom that didn't mind us free diving down, 60 feet to get close and get that picture. But they did. So it's really on their terms, and we were very, very lucky.
It's amazing. Shannon, I'm curious, can you tell us about bringing James Cameron and Sigourney Weaver onto this project? How did that happen, and did that change the course of the project at all?
Well, James Cameron is a National Geographic explorer as well as one of the world's most famous filmmakers, and he is passionate about oceans. He's passionate about ocean conservation, and when this project was brought to his attention, he wanted to be a part of it. And we were thrilled, absolutely thrilled, to not only have, Brian Scarry and the work he's done, plus James Cameron and his storytelling. It really helped us enhance the story. It helped us enhance what we wanted to convey. And then regarding Sigourney, I worked with Sigourney 13 years ago on the US version of Planet Earth. So I know her passions, I know her what she can do, and we had a delightful time working together. And when we were working on this, we kept saying there's a voice here. There's a really maternal Mother Earth kind of voice that can be brought, could bring this to life. And we discussed it and said, she would be fantastic to bring on board. And thankfully she saw the culture, she saw the emotions, she saw everything in it and came on board. And she really brought those emotions and the connections together in what the film portrays. And so we were just really, really thankful to have these powerhouses kind of come onto our team and really help us bring something special together.
Just amazing. I couldn't place her voice at first. And then when I realized who it was, I was like, oh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Shannon is not saying is that we actually made Sigourney cry. So we were in a recording session. There's this great moment in one of the films where we reconnect with a whale that Brian's been following for years, and we don't know if it's made it or not. And she'd seen the pictures, and when she started reading that, all that emotion sort of came to her, and that's the feeling and emotion that she brought to the read for the story, but it's also speaks a lot about the emotional connections we make with our subject matter, with our whales during the course of these films.
I'm sure. Raphael, this may sound like a silly question, but I know you've worked on a lot of narrative features. I don't know if you've worked on much nonfiction projects, and is the process different when it's, you know, documentary versus narrative?
So yes, that was my first big series, a nonfiction series. Well, I believe it really depends on the type of documentary you work on, and I think Secrets of the Whales is kind of dramatically structured sometimes. You know, sometimes as in fiction movies, there's a lot of moments that are very dramatic, sweet, disarming, and the emotions that I tried to convey through my music were very similar to what we could see in a fiction movie sometimes. But I also think that documentaries are reflecting real world issues, things and people, usually people or animals in that situation where we can relate a little more easily. And, you know, for example, I really relate to this orca mother carrying her dead cat for days. As a new mother myself, I was really, this is actually when I cried for information. And I probably related at that moment much more than I would relate to any fictional character in a movie. So yeah, so and I hope that my music helped a little bit conveying these raw emotions.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, I should let people know there's also going to be a Nat Geo book and magazine article tied to this series. In addition to this series, it means millions of people around the world are going to be seeing this. Why is that so important for this story?
You know, Janelle, when I first proposed this to National Geographic and went around to the various departments, you know, magazine, books, TV, I was really excited about this. For me, it was the first time in my career having, you know, just focused on animal stories and then looking at conservation. And now we had sort of this perfect storm in a good way where it wasn't a conservation story overtly, but yet it would potentially pay those dividends, that if people could see the ocean through the lens of culture and these families in the ocean that pass on ancestral traditions and have emotions, that maybe we would see our planet differently. So for me as a storyteller, the notion of, you know, doing a magazine story is always brilliant. National Geographic reaches maybe 50 million people every month when it comes out, but to amplify that with a book that has a shelf life that might be around 10 years. So, you know, some young person who may not know about this today, a decade from now, could still learn about that. And hopefully by then we know even so much more. And then to amplify it with a brilliant team like Red Rock, and to be able to bring in almost an organic way all of these talented people who can then scale it up and get it out, and then to have it on Disney Plus and reaching, you know, 100 million subscribers, I think is just fantastic. So to answer your question, it's important because the message that we're trying to tell, this isn't just another nature documentary. I don't think. I think it's much bigger than that. What I wrote in my proposal was that I think if we can see the natural world and our connection to it through the lens of these other families, these other sentient beings that have emotion and culture like us, that's a game changer. Once you know that, you can't unknow it. You know, there's no going back. And I think how we treat the oceans and the planet as a result of that, hopefully will be a good thing.
Just, I want to add on to what Brian said. You know, when Brian came to us with this project and we started working on it together on the culture, as Brian Armstrong mentioned, sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around culture. And then when you start seeing what they're doing, you know, that they're sharing food, they're teaching how to hunt, they're gathering together to learn and teach young people, you know, youngsters, they're traveling great distances to see old friends. That's stuff humans do. That's what our societies do and our cultures do. And you know, in each one of these shows, we meet pods, like the pod in New Zealand of orca, the humpbacks who gather in Sitka, Alaska to hunt together, who aren't related. The beluga gathering in the Arctic is, and then you have the sperm whale clan in pod in Dominica. If these pods are lost, it's a culture that's lost. It's tradition, it's communication, it's a family. And what the magazine article and the book and the series do is it makes us connected to a family. And when you see that baby beluga, or you see the young female in the sperm whale pod, or the orca, I don't want these families to go away. I want these families to thrive, and I want everybody to want to protect them and realize that if we lose one of these pods, we're losing something forever, something absolutely forever. So it's a really important message that in stories of unique families that need to be told.
What we may not have mentioned, Janelle, if I can add to that, is that this is a revelation to science, that that whales can feel these emotions. We have a line in one of the films, they feel love. Well, that to go through Nat Geo's research process to say, can we say that? Can we not? What is love? How do we define it? How do we see it? How do we recognize it when we see it? How do we know that animals are experiencing it like we experience it? Is that the same thing? So this is one line, but it's, can we say that or not? And not that long ago, that would have been such taboo to even suggest that. But the scientific community that Brian's been talking to, that sort of helped bring this project to light, they've had a shift. And I think this is really the first series where we're seeing that shift come out, where it's undeniable that they mourn their dead and that they play and that they love. So we're able to say that. We have science backing it up. And I think that's one of the things that really makes this so special, is that we're connecting in a real way. We're not just making this stuff up. It's actually, it's the evidence is undeniable. Darwin mentioned it, way back when, and then it was considered taboo and ignored, part of origin of species. But now it's come back and it's like, yep, guess what? They're more like us than we ever imagined.
And I'm sure so many people are going to want to know how they can help make sure our oceans are protected, especially after seeing this. Are there some resources you can point us to help, or what can people do if they want to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important question. And, I think the simple answer is the better informed we all are, as informed as consumers and as citizens, the decisions we make will impact everything on our planet, and certainly the whales. The whales are at the top of the food chain in the ocean, sort of as we are on land. So everything that goes into the ocean or is taken out of the ocean will impact them. Every single year we're dumping 18 billion pounds of plastic into the ocean. We've removed 90% of the big fish, the tuna, the billfish, the sharks. We're killing 100 million sharks every year. Half the world's coral reefs are gone now, mostly because of climate and habitat destruction. That dead calf that mom was carrying, we don't know exactly how that animal died, but there's a very high mortality rate among orca calves because the mom has absorbed so many chemicals in the ocean, PCBs, heavy metals, toxins that they pass on through the placenta. So I think anything we can do, the decisions we make, be a better consumer about seafood. If you're eating seafood, get a seafood watch card from National Geographic, or, an aquarium that tells you what species are better to eat. If you're voting as a citizen, maybe support candidates that believe in science and conservation, and just think about how your actions can be, improved perhaps. I mean, it's busy. We have busy lives and we don't have big bandwidth to pay attention to everything, but simple decisions can make a difference.
Absolutely. Well, I first want to thank you all so much for being here today, and congratulations on a beautiful series. I want to remind everyone that it premieres on Earth Day, April 22nd on Disney+. I want to thank everyone for joining us at home. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Thanks.
Thank you.